My name is Abhay, and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Hey everyone, on this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing, we welcome author, spoken word artist, and creative, Humble the Poet. Stay tuned. Wrapping up the year is hard work. Locking in the reflection on the year gone by and the optimism for the year ahead, for ourselves and in the company of others, takes harmonized energy, effort, and emotion. And speaking of emotional, thank you for listening to this, for sharing it with your friends and family, for rating, downloading, and subscribing wherever you get your podcasts, and for following on social media at Dr. Abhay. So our emotions are our innate neurophysiologic states, and they synchronize with our minute-by-minute dashboard of behaviors and ongoing survival. They're often reactionary or responsive, and often govern our actions. And somewhere in that complex system, both hidden and equally staring us right in the face, is love, usually manifesting with some combination of expression and outcome. It's an active force, and we feel it, we share it, we sometimes accept it, and we also may have a hard time holding on to it. Again, that whole issue of harmonizing energy, effort, and emotion for ourselves and for others. And so in thinking of this, it was terrific to share a conversation with Gunwar Singh, also known as Humble the Poet, and author of the new book, How to Be Loved. Gunwar was born and raised in Toronto, was a school teacher for many years before turning his creative energy as Humble the Poet to spoken word, hip-hop, design, and writing. His work and expression traverse many intersections, whether writing the best-selling book Unlearn with lessons and stories of self-empowerment, or directing videos, or public speaking, or making music. Humble the Poet is on a beautiful quest to unearth questions and make people think more deeply about themselves and the world around them. Now, interestingly, the full title of his newest book offering is How to Be Loved: Simple Truths for Going Easier on Yourself, Embracing Imperfection, and Loving Your Way to a Better Life. We had a chance to chat about some of these simple truths, about the book, about salty potato chips, about his teaching experiences, and about his creativity and practice of self-learning. So being curious of it all and mildly clever myself, I first wanted to find out in writing his new book what he perhaps had to unlearn.
The entire book is my journey of unlearning everything around love. I think probably the biggest one is the reminder that love is a verb way more than it's a noun. So love isn't something you acquire. Love isn't something you earn. Love isn't something you win. Love is something you do. It's something that you serve. It's something that you practice. It's something that you can reflect upon. I think that was probably the biggest one. And then starting to realize that all the things that we think are love are not actually love. They're fast food bootleg versions of it. The attention, the control, the power, the validation, the admiration, the success, the clout, all of those things that we kind of, require on some capacity from a social perspective, have become kind of things we thirst for as adults. And we have plenty of systems built in right now for us to pursue them, in a society where buy things, be happy is kind of the main religion.
Did you find that there were any facilitators to help you go through that process? Did you have any, we always deal with guides or coaches, and sometimes from very unexpected places, but in that same unlearning process you just described, did you have any assists?
Yeah. Every ex in my life, and also to be, this book was inspired by an unsuccessful engagement, and I talk about that story in the book. But also, I have a friend, Aubrey Marcus. He's got a popular podcast, and having a 2-hour conversation with him about everything from polyamory all the way on to the challenges of having relationships, and watching him in his most radical honesty explore that, and open me to ideas I had never considered before. So, um,
Yeah.
and a lot of books, a lot of online
Yeah.
lectures, a lot of books, a lot of audiobooks. I read every philosopher I could read who spoke about love, every psychologist, every self-love guru, every dating coach. I read them all in the pursuit of trying to find that common thread to realize more love in our lives.
What was the ignition for this overall? I mean, was this a sort of, hey, you've been thinking about this for a long time, or was there a sort of aha moment, a spark, if you will?
I mean, I was in a relationship that was trying to evolve to the next level,
Mm,
and there were clear problems between us that struggling to resolve. And I think I had originally recognized that I was struggling in the world of empathy. I
yeah.
think, I was kind of raised in an environment where vulnerability was seen as weakness. So I kind of overly corrected and became very self regulated, and wasn't too strong in the world of co regulation, which I think is essential to have a healthy relationship with another human being. Um, so that really started it. I wanted to be better at the game of love. That journey in itself led me to realize that I was probably in a situation I shouldn't have been in, but that was definitely the catalyst. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing with the book. This isn't a book to help you find your life partner. This is a book to help you have a deeper understanding of what it means to experience love, and that may motivate you to find a life partner. That may motivate you to end the current one you have. Um, you know, it's all about where the love can come from and how to realize it.
Did you find that in the process of doing so and sort of like that discovery, whether it's for, again, relationships outside or, amorous relationship, did you find that some of those lessons you were finding were helping you in other sort of platonic relationships, relationship with your family, with colleagues, and things like that?
Yeah, I think the art of the relationship is no different. I
Yeah.
think the intensity and the stakes are higher, but our interpersonal relationships, whether it be family, friends, romantic, work, people you're sharing the subway with, are all kind of the same.
Yeah.
And they're most successful when we realize we're all in it together. They're most successful when we can be more curious and judgmental. And I think from that standpoint, it definitely did. And the book itself is broken up into three sections. The first section is called WTF is love. The second section is love for self, and the final section is love for others.
Yeah.
So I don't have a specific section on romantic love. It's more so all of these insights will help you with your grandkids. It'll help you with your siblings. It'll help you with your annoying coworker who you share a cubicle with. It can help you with all of that, because at the end of the day, love is a constant. It's a constant force existing in our lives, and it's more so that we put a lot on top to kind of bury it. And instead of trying to do new things to realize it, it's really about clearing away the old stuff.
I was going to ask you, why do you think we have so much buried on top of that? Why do we shove it down? Why, and for that matter, why do you think we need reminders so frequently that, love is so universal? It's a great guide wire for living.
I think it's the same. I kind of liken it to food. You know, 5,000 years ago, there was simple, nutritious, a few options of food, and it did the job. And now we have, much quicker, cheaper, faster options of food that lack nutrition, but have all the convenience, are easily accessible, and get the job done for the type of lifestyle that this world has become,
Mm,
which is hyper productive. Grow, 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 work, 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 do, do, do. So I think it's the same thing. Um, in the world of love. There's a nutritious love that is a lot slower, a lot more nutritious, requires labor, requires sacrifice, requires work. But then, we have all these hyper flavored bootleg versions of love, like salty potato chips, that are completely addictive, and none of us are immune to it. Those are constantly dangled in front of us as incentives to participate in the economies that we're in. And you have to make somebody feel like they're lacking in order to sell them something.
yeah.
Whether it goes back to Edward Bernays, the emotional marketing campaigns that he did back in the days, up to whether it's selling makeup now or whether it's selling a car or a Gucci
Sure.
belt or the new iPhone. People aren't buying iPhones because they need phones. They're buying iPhones to like maintain a level of status and being up to date because God forbid you have an iPhone 10 or whatever. And at the same time, as children, while our brains are still formulating and forming, we can only often see things from a dualistic perspective.
Yeah.
We don't, it's really black and white. It's actually black and white for our brains. And we make a lot of really important socialized decisions at those ages with that black and white thinking. And then as our brains become more complex and we can see the gray in between, we don't really update our software and update our choices.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of it as well. I think one of the big things that I really noticed is how much we blame ourselves for external bullshit.
Yeah.
It's we internalize it and we make coping mechanisms and adjust accordingly when really half the time it's not our fault. It's the adults that raised us aren't perfect and they might have had a bad day, but
Yeah.
as being the center of the universe children that we thought it was about us and we adjusted our behavior and our strategies towards life accordingly and never took the time to revisit that.
Have as you grow and mature and develop and you've gone on this journey, have you found it easier, in fact, to pay attention to the grays, to prioritize that as part of your storytelling a little bit?
Easier? No. This
Maybe better? Is it
Oh,
more
is it more
comfortable?
effective?
Yeah.
It is more effective, and as I practice it, I'm more cognizant of it. Definitely,
Yeah.
but there's still a big practice of shortening my reaction time, so I
Sure.
can lengthen my response time. And what I'm noticing, and even now with certain friends I'm helping out, there's this big narrative of how it should be versus how it is. And it's like, I shouldn't need to look at my phone. I
Yeah.
shouldn't need to eat junk food, even if it's, and I'm more of like, no, like obviously you shouldn't need to eat junk food, but the solution still is not having it in the house. It's not relying
Yeah.
on a discipline,
Yeah.
so it's like, I shouldn't need to have emotional responses and I should have much more logical reactions. Sorry, I shouldn't have emotional reactions and have much more logical responses, but we will always have an emotional reaction first. And the question is, how quickly can we address that,
Yeah.
breeze through it, do something before we can actually have our logical uh, response?
I was gonna say, so if I equate the potato chip to the anger and agitation and anxiety that's thrown upon us, throughout
Yeah.
our society, how do I not have the potato chip in my house then?
Yeah, that's that. Well, so I think the first step is to acknowledge that you're not more powerful than the potato chip. Like you're
Yeah.
not more powerful than social media. Like these are companies owned by billionaires devoting billions of dollars and hiring the smartest people in the world to get you sucked into their rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You are not the exception to the rule. So, the issue here is it's the same with the potato chip. It's like you can't just have one. So you
Right.
don't start and you don't rely on discipline. If you know that, there's proximity matters. They've done studies where they've put in candy jars in the middle of offices and watched them empty out. Then
Yeah.
they've hidden them in the corner of the office and no one touches them. They don't know they're there.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. I had a big sugar craving last night. I had no sugar in my place.
Yeah.
You know, Not to say that I couldn't have gone out and chased some sugar, but that one additional road bump,
Sure.
worked in my favor. And we are our parents.
Yeah.
We have to raise ourselves now. So for me, I think it's really about being realistic that this is not discipline and self strength and all of this and trying to be strong. It's just really knowing your limitations and
Mm.
adjusting and creating an environment accordingly.
I love this idea of, abandoning the potato chips of anxiety and anger and agitation in my house, but in fact amplifying and creating spaces where the only option is love then.
Yeah. And I think that's what it is too. Like, there's a great definition by Naval Ravikant of, love is what's left when all other emotions cease to exist.
Sure. Yep.
And I like that. I love this concept of love being the default versus it being, something supreme to everything else. And it's like, no, all these other emotions are extremely important, especially from an evolutionary stance. The vast majority of emotions on the emotional wheel would be categorized as negative, but that's because negative emotions keep you alive.
Yeah.
We don't learn when we're happy, and you can't kill a meal when you're in a good mood. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like we have these negative emotions for a purpose, and that paranoia served a purpose. All of these things served a purpose for the world that us as a species were living in for tens of thousands of years. And this modern version of life that we have isn't that old, and our biology will not be catching up anytime soon to that.
Yeah. Very true.
From any standpoint. Yeah. So it's we're not even like our eyes aren't even primed to see some of the colors that these yellows and these reds. They don't exist in nature. We're not
Yeah.
primed to be seeing them, and they impact us. So these flavors, these sounds, these emotions, this hyper reality that we've now created in our entertainment industry. This is all potato chips, and it's all completely addictive. It's a big salt rock,
Yeah.
and from that standpoint, it's not, as I said, it's just recognizing that like I gotta reduce my instances of being around this stuff
Yeah.
because it will devour me. It is undefeated.
Yeah.
I am not stronger than this, and that's okay. This isn't a weakness.
Well, and like acknowledging that, right? Giving yourself the licensure to say, like, hey, look, these are forces that are bigger than you, and ensuring, in fact, that you're recognizing that very well.
Completely.
As a performer for you, was the experience of narrating this obviously, in a different medium now as an author, were there certain elements of empathy and storytelling as a spoken word artist or a rap artist that directly aided you in sort of crafting this as a written narrative?
I try to write like I speak,
Yeah.
and there were certain instances with the editing where I wasn't using the correct dictionary definition on a word. But there's certain words that we that are normal in conversation that we're completely using incorrectly. And I think one of them was marinate. So marinate on that idea. You can't marinate on an idea. You can ruminate.
Yeah.
You can marinate in an idea. But the the grammar police, for me, the connection of having bad grammar and sounding like a normal human being having a conversation
Right.
is much more important than appeasing the laws of grammar
Yeah.
from like 200 years ago or whatever.
Right.
So I think from that standpoint, it's something that I definitely think about. And I have rules of no words bigger than mayonnaise when I
Yeah.
write. And I was an elementary school teacher, so I always, it's about packaging this to speak to everybody's inner child. And then and working in music, I have a lot of experience in front of the microphone. So in terms of recording it, there was definitely a process of going through it. And the way this book is set up is this book has 6 love stories. The bookends of each section are love stories. They're non-traditional love stories in every capacity, but they're love stories nonetheless. And I waited to read those at the end because they're so emotional. So
Yeah.
like the meat and potatoes of the book are philosophies, observations,
Yeah.
ruminations, and all of that, and insights. But the love stories are the much more emotional ones. And I knew that those would be the toughest to get through. So we waited till the very end of the recording process to go through those. And for anyone who listens to the audiobook, the first chapter, I barely get through it. And we didn't
Right.
edit that in any capacity. We probably just edited it for the long gaps. But you're going to hear the sniffs and sniffles. You'll hear the tears. It was a heavy thing. And it was the same thing with my last audiobook. I had chapters about my last dog passing away. And
Yeah.
there wasn't a world where I would have been able to read that chapter completely without getting emotional. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Humble the Poet. Stay tuned. Conversation. It's the antidote to apathy and the catalyst for relationships. I'm Abhay Dandekar, and I share conversations with global Indians and South Asians so everyone can say, trust me, I know what I'm doing. New episodes weekly, wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Lily Singh, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with author, spoken word artist, and creative, Humble the Poet. The energy that you get when you're doing a performance live and someone's feeling it and it's palpable. There's a sense of that shared experience whether it's emotion, it's excitement, any of the sort of spectrum of different kind of feelings that you might have. When someone's reading your work now, are you hoping that the reactions are somewhat the same, or is it more of a discovery? Like, hey, I hope there's new emotions or new reactions that people get.
I think at this point, I've really made peace with the fact that I'm 51% of this journey in this conversation.
Yeah,
And the second the book is out of my hands, it's out of my hands. And
yeah,
the longer you spend on this earth, the more you realize that people can only meet you as far as they've gone.
yeah,
So, if I'm talking about heartbreak to somebody who's never experienced heartbreak, there's no, it's not my business whether they get it or not.
sure.
Or, I have a chapter in here about an ex girlfriend talking to me about kind of, playfully chastising me about how dare I write a book about love when I don't have children.
Mm,
And that in itself, I think is going to be a really interesting one. And I've heard that before from parents of some of my friends being like, you write these books and you don't have kids. And I think there's a whole different perspective that comes from that, which I'm not lost on,
yeah,
but I can only write a book from where I'm at. So I think, there can be people who have context that I don't, that are going
yeah,
to connect with us in a different way. And there could be people who definitely have context that I do,
yeah,
because they might be younger or what have you. So I think from that standpoint, it's going to be it's less for me to concern myself with. I think for me, I focus on the accessibility and the digestibility of the words.
does that motivate you any differently when you are cognizant of knowing that you're relating to a situation in a different way, whether it's not as a parent or you've not gone through a situation like that, but perhaps your motivation is that, like, look, I'm developing a different empathy for this.
Yeah, in a way, because I think my value add, like my actual, what do I bring to the table, is I put words together, and
Yeah,
that's my 20,000 hours of labor. I've done that. I can confidently say I do that better than the
yeah,
average
and your
kid.
passion. Yeah,
My passion, my obsession, and the thing I put the time into.
yeah,
I can't build a computer. I can't fix a toilet. I can't swim. I can't do these things. There's things I can't do and there's things I can do. And what I
yeah,
can do is put words together. That's my contribution in this world.
right,
And taking ideas that have been very very popularly misconstrued and trying to bring them back to their essence and allowing people to see the blind spots in it, or helping people find the reasons we believe the things we believe. In this book, I talk about the sources of the knight in shining armor and the damsel in distress, helping people see that history and where it actually came from, and realizing that, wait a minute, this informs so much of my understanding of what love is.
sure,
I think that's an important job for me to do. I do think from that perspective, my goal always is just to have people feeling, wow, I never looked at it that way. And with this book specifically, because it was written over the pandemic, there was a lot of time, like a lot of empty space and time, and a lot of internal reflection, because
some rumination maybe, or
yes, adequate to put it properly, a lot of rumination.
right,
um but then also, like, I remember, and it's also one of those things where it's like, if you went to the gym for 6 months and never looked in the mirror, and then one day you look in the mirror like, oh, I can see the difference. And
yeah,
there was a moment of a very intelligent friend of mine coming over, and kind of playfully teasing me, like, you're dumbasses know nothing about love. Why are you writing a book about love? And then we kind of going through the, like, us kind of having a verbal spar,
yeah,
and it being clear to both him and me that I definitely know my stuff now.
yeah,
So it's like, like, I'm not claiming to be an expert on love. I'm claiming to be the guy who read more books, did the research, and now I'm sharing my notes. That's all I'm doing.
yeah.
I'm sharing my. I'm not a love guru. I'm just sharing my notes, and I've taken way more notes than the average person on the subject.
Right. Let me ask you something, because you started, or you mentioned that you were an elementary school teacher. I mean, in some ways you had a different role in that area, but yet your messaging, that the way that you interacted with, very in a formative way for people, young people particularly. Do you ever miss that elementary school life? Kids calling you Mr. Singh, or at least the growth and even in some ways the seva that being a teacher offered.
No, I think definitely there's a lot of PR being sold to teachers about the beauty of that job and the
Mm,
seva and the passion all of that. I think, and I was a teacher in Canada, where where the school system even isn't as underserved as it is
Sure.
out here in the states.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's outdated. It's extremely outdated. I think the pandemic kind of lifted the veil of that. That this has kind of become
Yeah.
uh, modern babysitting for those who have to be plugged into a outdated 9 to 5 work schedule.
Are there elements of that role that especially kind of like the dialogue or the discussion with kids in that arena?
Being in a room with kids, yeah, well, and that's the thing. That's the thing is like being in a room with kids
Yeah.
is epic and it's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially after a month of me, kind of laying the groundwork of our relationship, and I was very cognizant of being proactive instead of reactive. So I wasn't a teacher. I was a teacher that really made expectations super clear for
Yeah.
them to understand. So very rarely did I ever get upset because I was never reacting to anything,
Yeah.
and everything was kind of clear. So from that standpoint, it was effective. It's not enough time.
Yeah.
You're not spending enough time with these kids. Like it's 10 months, and then so they're not these projects that you think that you can see a lot of growth in.
Yeah.
And you're also, it was also just a constant reminder of the system. I taught for 6 years, and every child I had was a child of an immigrant or an immigrant themselves. I never
Mhm.
had a Caucasian student.
Yeah.
And most of the parents were heavily educated individuals from other countries who were not allowed to presently use their education to better themselves. So I
Sure.
had, engineers working at gas stations or coffee shops, and
Yeah.
teachers who had to be my volunteers, or principals from India
Right.
who had to be my volunteers to get some volunteer hours so they can apply for teacher college and start all over. And I think it was a constant reminder of kind of the inequities of how the government was treating the people in marginalized communities. So from that standpoint, there was a lot of it really kind of, what it was. I think the idealisms of being a student in school,
Mm.
all of that was shed by being a teacher in the school.
Yeah.
And having I had at one year I had 35 students and only 28 coat hooks. you know
Yeah.
and it's like, and I'm in Toronto in the winter.
Right. Right.
And so it's like, you're trying to wrap your head around this, and you started to realize how much a really good teacher never sees a challenge and blames the circumstances. Like if a kid doesn't get it, the teacher asks himself, what am I doing wrong?
Yeah.
But then just start like, I'm not doing anything wrong if I don't have enough co-hooks in my classroom.
Yeah.
The average teacher will still make it their responsibility, pay money out of their pocket to address that problem. So I think I started to really start seeing that exploitation of it. And also, it didn't hurt that like my union boss was my next door neighbor in the classroom. So
Right.
I had already come from a world of social justice. So she was really
Yeah.
putting it in my head, like, look, don't break your back for this, because they rely on you going the extra mile, and that lets them cut corners. They ask the parents for extra money because they refuse to pay for the field trips.
Yeah.
So you started to see that, and you started to realize how that in combination with just the challenges that the kids were going through in their family lives were both setting them up to fail.
Did that sense of, or that realization of like, look, I'm witnessing firsthand these inequities, the injustices, or even just the pain of doing this, were in some ways those actually accelerators for you to really now pursue the passion of spoken word and and really sort of embark on that journey, meaning that like, hey, that experience, in fact, yes, was filled with all the things that were so fraught in the teaching business, as you mentioned, but without it, perhaps it wouldn't have necessarily fueled the rest of your journey.
Yeah, no, 1000%. I mean, I can pinpoint the moment I became Humble the Poet. It was
Yeah.
sitting in a room full of young professionals who were trying to get involved in social issues and help the community out. And somebody making a statement like, the kids don't listen, and
Yeah.
then me saying, no, no, you don't know how to speak to the kids. And that was the birth of Humble the Poet, which
Yeah.
was recognizing that I knew how to communicate in a way that other people didn't, because even for a lot of people who know better, there's kind of an intellectual pretentiousness
Yeah.
to them, and they don't understand cognitive ability is genetic. There's very little you can do to impact your IQ, and you can understand deep concepts, or you can use have a triple digit IQ or something. That's not available to everybody. So when people don't live like you, or believe like you, or understand concepts like you, that's not their feeling.
Yeah.
That's so. And I was recognizing that. I was in a room full of doctors and lawyers and stuff, and they were just talking about how these ghetto kids don't get it. And I was like, no, you don't get it.
Right. Right.
Because and I understand that from even in my house, like the cognitive abilities, like I'm in no way, shape, or form the smartest person in my own family, and it's like, so you assume everyone's like that, and then when you go into the real world, you realize, like, oh no, there's definitely intellectual diversity.
Yeah.
So
and it's framework. Yeah.
It's a framework, yeah, and I think that in itself was the first step to me being like, okay, like, let me package things that I feel are important.
Yeah.
And it's always been this me loving to learn, and becoming a teacher was wanting a job where no 2 days would feel the same.
Yeah.
You could do it for 30 years and still say you haven't seen it all. So from that standpoint, it was really priming me to communicate and simplify ideas and make heavy ideas feel lighter, because that's exactly what you're doing for students.
Yep.
But on top of that, I had always grown up in a world of social issues and social justice. So that primed me. And then as I started talking about important ideas, it was always about packaging it in a way that everybody can understand it. So that was definitely there. And then on top of that, kind of as I settled into the job, realizing that the actual job itself, the skills required to be an elementary school teacher, they weren't heavily academic. They were a lot of they were soft skills, which are extremely important. Cooperation, adaptability, patience,
Yep.
planning, all of these things, which are completely skills that can have a massive impact on an individual's net worth, but are not focused on in education.
I heard you once say that when we take responsibility, that we have power. And where do we, I mean, now from your vantage point, where do we as a community of, say, North American, South Asians, or for that matter, any community, where do we need to take more responsibility in order to further empower ourselves?
We need to focus on if we're talking about our kids, their EQs.
Yeah.
I remember, but also like soft skills. Like you're a medical professional, right? You finish med school and then you get into rotations and then you get into residency, right? By rotations, academically, everyone in the room with you has the same grades. They've already filtered out everybody else. By residency, it's only the cream of the crop, right? So at this point, when you're sitting down with potential heads of hospitals and stuff like that, there is a point of them simply thinking like, well, who do I want to see every day?
Yeah.
The qualifications, everyone in every resume on my desk is qualified.
Yeah.
At this point, who do I want to see every day? Who will I look forward to seeing? Who do I want to go to the Christmas party? Who do I want to see at the hospital Christmas party, or go to the bar with after? Like, and even in my world of entertainment, like, my likability has taken me way farther than my talents.
Yeah. So do we not pay enough respect to those skills and pay far more attention to the sort of metrics of academia, if you will?
I think as children of immigrants, we definitely don't. And I think it's just about information. I think it's just this outdated idea of creating these safe and secure opportunities. There's very few ways left to contribute to the economy and to make a living that require formal schooling.
Yeah.
I think I forgot the way somebody put it. If you're building something or if you're fixing something, you need to go to school. Everything else is just learning. Like, I didn't need to go to school to be a teacher.
Yeah.
And I didn't learn anything in teachers college. I learned everything my first year being thrown into the wolves. You as a medical professional should definitely go to school. You're fixing and building. It's a very different situation. But I'm a professional writer now. I didn't have to go to school for that. photographers don't have to go to school.
Right.
Maybe mechanical engineers do. People creating our skyscrapers do. People
Yeah.
building our bridges do. But people who are designing the interiors of these buildings don't.
Yeah.
And I think from that standpoint, recognizing that there are more transferable skills to help you make a living, and also the real safety and security at this point is your adaptability, and that's going to probably come from
100%.
being an entrepreneur
Yeah.
more than it is being somebody who has gotten so used to a salary job that you've allocated every dollar from that salary into your bills, that when shit hits the fan, you have no idea what to do.
Well, and I think the apprenticeship in life of social relatability and adaptation and being flexible and how do you grow relationships. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't get enough apprenticeship of that.
And these are on the report card. These are actually on the report card, but they're at the bottom, and they're not prioritized over the academics.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, at this point, how many extremely successful people come from worlds where they're academic,
Yeah.
and I think that's just an important concept to explore. Where it's, and again, I don't have children, so I don't want to speak on that. But as a professional educator for
Yeah.
many years, it's literally, if you make the non-negotiable with your child that laziness is not acceptable, you have the freedom to do almost anything you want, but you don't get to half-ass any of it.
Yeah.
I think that's setting them up for success dramatically more.
Then the grade.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
celebrating the A if
Yeah.
you know that it was just easy, and it's not diminishing the C if you know they gave it 110%.
Totally.
You actually know that, and you really focused on getting them to be honest and self-aware about their energy and their efforts, so they know that, listen, whatever I do, I have to give it my all
Yeah.
for long periods of time, despite the monotony, despite the repetition.
Yeah.
Like, you're actually setting up an individual to be successful and for life. And then from a pragmatic standpoint, probably coding.
Yeah.
If you want to have superpower in this world, learn how to
Start
code.
coding. Right.
Yeah.
You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. After a quick break, we'll come back to our conversation with Humble the Poet. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Sean J. Chernin, founder of Crossover Basketball and Scholars Academy. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing with Abhay Dandaka.
Welcome back to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Let's rejoin our conversation now with author, spoken word artist, and creative, Humble the Poet. And I've been thinking a lot about those messages or those stories or those pockets where we're just not magnifying it enough. It's voiceless, it's marginalized, whether they're ideas, whether they're stories, whether they're people. What do you think are some of those pockets or corners or areas of our shared experience that need more amplifying? Like, certainly, like the capacity to build love and self-love, certainly the capacity to value and prioritize hard work and anti-laziness, as you talked about. What are some of those other areas now that we really should be focusing on a lot more?
I think cooperation. I think the ability to coexist with anybody despite your differences.
Yeah.
That was the thing as a teacher. I'd put them in groups, and they're like, I don't like so and so. Like, well, in life, you'll be around a lot of people you don't enjoy,
Yeah.
and if you can still figure it out with them, this is going to definitely make you successful.
Yeah.
And I think that is an extremely important skill set. I think communication.
Yeah.
The ability, I think a lot of, schoolyard violence is coming from an inability to communicate.
Yeah.
They have limited tools and they get frustrated and throw a punch. But your ability to put words together, makes you an extremely effective person, and it makes you it makes you dangerous as well. It puts you in a situation to establish boundaries. It puts you in a situation to teach people how to be around you. It puts you in a situation to help other people understand their own selves and their own thoughts, which offers value to them. And the moment you offer value to anybody else, that's the moment you'll be provided with resources to continue doing so.
So I'm listening to your way that you express yourself as a, master communicator, someone who I hope also cooperates with others and, you get that, you get those skills. I'm curious about one thing. It's sort of a weird but playful question. I mean, as you're saying all this, I'm wondering, as a poet, as a creator, as a communicator, do you ever dream in spoken word? Do you ever, in silence, have some of these kind of serendipitous moments come at you?
I definitely have lines. I definitely have random lines coming to me, little opening lines, and that's usually what starts a poem or a song or something like that. A line
Yeah.
comes and it festers within me. I don't think I've ever dreamed anything poetic, but definitely hearing people speak, and then also even just hearing stories. Sometimes people say things that I find like epic, and
Yeah.
I'll take that and like completely stretch it out. And I think that's kind of you hear a 10,000 foot idea and you want to zoom it into the 5,000 feet, and then zoom it into the 1,000, zoom it into the 100 feet, and zoom it
Yeah.
into the 5 feet. So definitely that happens quite a bit. And now I'm also involved in TV and film writing, so that's I only try to write real stories, and a
Mm.
lot of these stories are just coming from people I know, my own experiences, and you start to realize like how interesting life really is. And then also like living out here now in Los Angeles, you also start to realize how very little comes from people's imaginations is actually like real life. Like you start to meet the characters. You're like,
Yeah.
holy crap! Like
Yeah.
these people weren't playing a character on TV. They're actually
They're
that.
it.
Yeah, they're that eccentric. They're that
Yeah.
unique, and that's a whole other trip when you start to think about how everyone is absorbing and contributing to life from such different perspectives.
Sure.
And it's just, yeah, it's mind blowing to think about.
Well, and as you continue to grow and mature in your own artistic journey, and you're doing this now in Los Angeles, how do you? I'm curious how you balance stillness and peace, and sort of the idea of being content with almost the sort of restless energy and excitement that it takes to be creative, or can you be creative with both? Does it diminish at all achievement if you spend time and energy both pausing in that contentness?
I mean, I think it's definitely redefining the definition of achievement first and foremost.
Yeah.
I think when I wrote this book, for example, I started by saying, okay, 1,000 words a day. And then if you got the 1,000 words done, that was an achievement. And then I was, in the vein of self awareness, seeing myself subconsciously push to get to the 1,000 words, and that having a negative impact on the quality of the work. So then I changed it to 1 hour uninterrupted writing, whether I wrote down 1 word or 1,000 words or 10,000 words in that hour. And that became a lot more authentic because at this point it was like, look, we are not doing anything else. We are
Yeah.
just writing. We're not looking at our phone. We're not switching whatever. And that allowed me a daily accomplishment, and that added up. So, this book, How to Be Loved, is a 60, I think it was 60, 70,000. They wanted 60,000. I wrote 140. So, I
Wow.
wrote a lot.
Yeah.
And then the process of bringing it down, which is I'm really proud of because it allows,
Yeah.
what's left after the cutting room floor. Like
Right.
this is it's really really good. And I just finished the audiobook, so I was just like, oh, I was very impressed, and I'm my biggest critic. I think redefining success from that standpoint,
Yeah.
I think is important, and I think just in general, being cognizant of how I, like everybody else, probably have an underregulated reward center right now,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to address it. So
Yeah.
I'm recognizing that TV, video games, my phone, music, all of these are contributing to my over addiction to dopamine and quick fixes,
Yeah.
and the art of doing nothing is eliciting a lot of anxiety because you're going through a dopamine withdrawal. So I'm trying to mellow that out. So like I went for a hike yesterday with no headphones or nothing,
Yeah.
no access to phone, just walking and staring at natural colors and hearing natural sounds and just being left with my thoughts and allowing my thoughts to kind of do what they do and just kind of like clearing out my inbox. But I'm very cognizant of it and realizing that I'm aware of it and how most people aren't.
And that's hard, right? I mean, it's hard to stop the chase.
Potato chips, yeah, it's the
Yeah,
same thing.
that's
Yeah,
right. Hard to not have the potato chips inside. I read that you once said reputations are prisons, so fuck them.
yeah.
And in the end, is that sort of the ultimate mantra for self love?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a story in the book. A friend of mine, Marquise, he's a retired NFL player,
Yeah,
and in the story, there's I went to I do ice baths, and I went to an ice bath retreat that one of his doctors was throwing, and there was a moment where the first day, everyone was getting in the ice. So it was like we're in the mountains in Utah, and there's little kiddie pools full of ice water, and everybody's
yeah,
getting in, and then Marquise said, "No, I'm not getting in." And then people are kindly trying to reassure him that it's okay, you'll be okay. And he's like, "No, I've done this before. I'm just not going in today."
yeah,
And it was really interesting because his answer was just no, and it wasn't to prove or not prove anything to anybody. He didn't care if people understood why. And then the irony of it was everybody did the ice bath for 5 minutes, whatever, got out and it went inside. And there was one person who was afraid of going in. And then Marquis said, "Okay, I'll go in with you if you're
mm,
too scared to go in." And then this is after everyone left. He went in with this individual. Um, so the interesting thing was like he had no desire and motivation to prove himself to anybody,
sure,
but he did have a desire to serve. So he went in. His only motivation for going to the ice was service. And that was the only way to get him in the ice. And he didn't
right,
care that people saw. And I think that idea of these reputations, because the reputations go both ways, positive and negative.
sure, yeah,
And I've found that we don't realize how damaging compliments can be just as damaging as insults.
yeah,
Especially when they come from somebody you care about. And I've had that where I had somebody constant, especially here in LA. People in LA carry a lot of anxiety around what other people think. And I had somebody introduce me to a room full of celebrities as, "Hey, this is Humble. He figured it out. He doesn't care what anybody thinks." And then all of a sudden, you start to subconsciously be like, "I have to now act like I don't care what anybody thinks."
right,
But obviously, I care what other people think.
yeah,
But they said that, and that made me look super cool. And everyone
yeah,
was like, "Wow," you know what I mean?
right,
Like
right,
celebrities that I admire were like, "Wow, how did you do it? What's your
yeah,
secret?" And
sure,
and I'm sitting there like, I don't even know where they got that from.
yeah. And does that mindset take depth and patience and practice to be able to realize? I mean, like anything else, it's sort of like it's a stepwise journey. There's going to be steps forward, steps backward, and whatnot.
Yeah, I think the practice creates the depth,
Yeah,
right? It's like you're chipping away or you're digging away, and I think the depth comes from that. But I mean, we only the things that we get that we do well are things that we practice.
yeah,
It's just repetition. The more it's whatever you want to do. You don't say like I suck at being self aware. Just be like I suck at being self aware yet. For
yeah.
now.
For today. Yeah,
Yeah, obviously the more fun you can have in your practice, the easier it'll be to do it. But that's the secret sauce of all of this. It's just repetition and doing it endlessly and doing it consistently, and then all of a sudden you start to get better. And that's with any exercise, that's with any skill, that's with anything.
yeah,
And most of the things that we can do competently right now came from especially reading. It came from repetition. It was a 10-year program.
yeah,
You have to learn the alphabet and the sounds of the alphabet, the 2-letter words, 3-letter words, 4 letter. We worked our way up to reading novels,
yeah,
and it was a 10-year journey that somebody else laid out for us. And it was there, the adults kept us accountable and kept us practicing. If we can do it, we can do that with anything.
yeah. You've challenged a lot of conventional thought and practice in your experience, right? You've sort of rewritten things to help establish new boundaries. Now, how do you respond or feel for that matter as new artists and creators challenge or break some of the maybe conventional artistic bars that in some ways you've helped establish?
I mean, if you're not growing, you're not living. So I feel like, the endless scrutiny is essential. And,
Yeah.
you know, the farthest I can go is acknowledging I have blind spots, let alone knowing what they are. So, that's all you want. You don't want, obviously I'm creating stuff that I want to maintain a level of relevance, for 100 years. I want my books to outlive me. But yeah, 1000%. Like, my life is over if I can't get proven wrong. That's what learning is. It's like I never looked at it that way. I never thought about it that way. That's what learning is. And I'm a lifelong learner. I want to learn forever. I want to look back. I look back at myself 10 years ago and see a lovable idiot. And I want to look back 10 years from now and see a lovable idiot.
Does that bring you a lot of optimism to know that there's...
I mean, I don't see it as much as you're talking about, so I don't have the optimism. I haven't come across too many people doing that. I think maybe I've come across a handful of people who have a hustle in the social media space that I think is amazing, with a level of self-awareness I just spoke to a little online comedian who is like 25, and the things that she realizes and she talks about are amazing. And I was trying to speak with her to give her these gems to avoid certain,
Yeah.
roadblocks. And I was like, oh, she already gets it. And as they should, you know what I mean? Like, every generation should be picking up this stuff smarter. And, self-awareness is becoming more prevalent, and people picking up on their patterns is becoming more prevalent. But even from like a straight three-dimensional business perspective, a lot of these young creators that I'm meeting are they're a lot more aware of the pitfalls. So from that standpoint, it's very impressive. I mean, in terms of content and ideas and stuff like that, from a South Asian perspective, I haven't seen too much of it. I wish I did. And then also, as just somebody who is fortunate enough to be in the industry, I can see behind the scenes, and some of the most celebrated individuals, are struggling immensely.
Yeah.
And if that goes unaddressed, they're gonna most likely implode. I started my journey much later. I was 29 when I left my job. And when great things and amazing things happened, I still felt overwhelmed. But I did think to myself, like, shit, if I was 19,
Right.
I would have crashed and burned. So I see that. I see that now. And I'm also the guy who has an inbox full of people messaging about how much they're struggling. And then you look at their profile pictures, and it's just all happiness and sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
So I think I'm a little bit more aware of that. But definitely, in terms of concepts and depth, I haven't seen too much of that, but definitely in terms of hustle, I see people having a better understanding of what the hustle is, not simply thinking making a little bit of money in half a year means they'll be famous forever. I see that, and also not falling for people trying to exploit them for their talents, or the fact that they're white hot in the moment. It's unfortunate in this, especially in social media, because the algorithm is definitely encouraging people to identify trends more than set them. Yeah. And I think from that standpoint, it's very challenging to see creativity. That doesn't encourage creativity and uniqueness. So I haven't found too many people that are doing very, very, very creative things that excite me. But hopefully we'll get there.
Hopefully we will. And hopefully people are, I think, understanding and learning and appreciating and exploring your work to provide more guide wires for themselves. Humble, thank you so much for joining us. What a treat. I hope we'll get a chance to do it again in the future.
Thank you so much for having me, for sure.
So please check out Humble's latest book, How to Be Loved, available everywhere. So that's a wrap for the year, and I hope you've enjoyed this all as much as I have. And I can't wait to share more conversations with you in 2023 on Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Till next time, I'm Abhay.